Hi boys and girls, good morning, happy Monday. As you can see, I am going to be giving you a asynchronous lesson today, meaning that I will not go live. You will be watching this video and following my instructions. We will also be going through this lesson and you will be learning about some various things today. We are going to be looking into some vocabulary when it comes to literary elements. We're going to be looking at stylistic devices. We're going to be looking at point of view, repetition, some other vocabulary words as well in relation to out of the dust. And we're going to be completing a worksheet today from your Wit and Wisdom workbook, so make sure you have that handy. Our worksheet is going to look something like this. Okay, it's going to be Handout 21B, varying sentences. So this is what we're going to be going over. You will have to make sure that you fill out the notes today in this video because you will be turning this in tomorrow. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with our lesson today. So boys and girls, as you can see here, it is Monday, October 19th, the directions. Students will watch this video by the end of class. They should have completed Handout 21B, varying sentences, and their Wit and Wisdom student workbook. So make sure you have that workbook, and if you don't, I do know I have some students that don't have the workbook, you already know what to do. You write the notes in your ELA notebook. I was also going to add that you could complete the PDF file, but unfortunately, we don't have this PDF file. The Great Minds in Sync app does not provide us with this handout in a PDF form, meaning you cannot type it out. You do have to write it out, okay? So just to make that clear, boys and girls, you are going to have to be completing the worksheet we're going to be doing. That looks right there on the screen. You can see that little example, 21B, varying sentences. If you don't have the ELA Wit and Wisdom student workbook, you do need to take these notes in your ELA notebook because you are going to be sending me a picture tomorrow, not today, tomorrow when I come back and do live classes. So, no excuses. Please make sure you do take these notes. Okay, so just a little glance at where we are in the month. Last week we went ahead and completed multiple handouts. We also went over a couple of, one article, the Hoover's Prodigal Children article. And this week we are going to be continuing with Out of the Dust. We are about, I'd say 75% done with the book. We need that leftover 25%. So please make sure you're keeping up with the readings. I do have here a schedule where you should be at by the end of the week. Okay, so make that goal today for this week to make sure you complete reading those pages. I will have the audiobooks posted for you along with the scanned pages of the book for you. Okay, so today we are going to be completing Handout 21B, varying sentences. We're going to also try and look at 21C, which is a very short tips. There's some tips for enhancing our sentences when we write. For homework, this was homework over the weekend, but just in case you forgot to do it, I do need my students to make sure that they read pages 73 through 84 of Out of the Dust. These were pages we should have read Friday. Okay, so we should have read them over the weekend. We should already have that knowledge of what is happening in the book in our head. So make sure if you did not complete those pages over the weekend that you do that, okay? And then tomorrow and Wednesday, we're going to be having review days. We're going to be looking at specific poems because this Thursday we do have a bi-weekly assessment number 4. So you guys have already been taking these bi-weekly assessments. You should already have the hang of how they're going to be. 10 questions, 2 different poems, and it's going to be online, so make sure that we're ready for that. We're going to try our best to prepare as best as we can. for those review days, make sure you're in class. You do see there where it says HW, that's your homework for those specific days when it comes to reading the book. So on Tuesday, you'll be reading pages 87 through 85. Wednesday, you'll be reading for homework pages 99 and 105 of Out of the Dust. And then Thursday, you'll be reading 105 through 126. And then Friday, we will land in the pages between 127 to 149. So please don't stay behind. Make sure you're reading those pages. I do provide you with everything you need. The book is online. You have the audiobook, so there's no excuses, okay? Okay, next slide. So, what's the objective for today? Normally, I would have one of my students read this, but since it's a pre-recorded video, I'll go ahead and read it for us. Students will be able to analyze how stylistic devices help convey a character's perspective. Students will also be revising sentences in a variety of ways to enhance meaning and impact in writing. So we're really going to be honing in our writing, boys and girls. We need to start practicing, our writing skills, because we're going to have to be writing an essay on the 2 books that we've read so far for this year, But Not Buddy by Christopher Paul Curtis and Out of the Dust by Karen Hess. So we got to start getting in the hang of making sure we're writing in full, detailed sentences when it comes to answering specific prompts, okay? Your homework for today, I'm letting us know the homework before we get started with our lesson, because I want you to know of the expectations and what I expect of you after this video. So once you finish watching this whole video, you should have already finished the notes on Handout 21B, Varying Sentences. Please do not send me any type of picture tomorrow during class. I will be looking at your work and we'll go ahead and take it from there. But please do not send me a picture of your work until tomorrow, which is Tuesday during class. I will be looking at everyone's work during class, so make sure you have that ready for me so that I don't have to keep you more long within the class than I need to, okay? You will have to turn it in tomorrow, so make sure make sure you get it done. Number 2, you will have a vocabulary exit ticket where it is Monday. Usually on Mondays we go over vocabulary, so we're going to be looking at some vocabulary words, and you will have a very simple and easy exit ticket. And then, of course, your other piece of homework, which is the reading. Make sure that you read pages, it does say 60 to 84, but, if you've been keeping up, you've already read these pages. You can reread them or review them, but for my students specifically that haven't read these pages, you need to make sure you read these pages. I did assign pages 73 to 84, but I need to make sure that by tomorrow you are all the way up to page 84. One more time, let me make it very clear. By tomorrow, you need to make sure that you have read all the way to page 84 of Out of the Dust by Karen Hess. You need to know what's happening in this story in order to do well on your biweekly exams this week, and of course your end of module exam too. Moving on. So some questions we're going to be looking at, boys and girls, for today's lesson. I want us to keep these questions in the back of our head. The first question is our focusing question. How does hardship alter the characters' perspectives in Out of the Dust? So we need to think of the key words here in our focusing question. Keyword hardship. How does that alter? When we think of the word alter, we also want to think of change. How does these hardships change the characters and the way they think in Out of the Dust? And then our framing question is, how do stylistic devices reveal Billy Joe's character changing perspective? One more time, let me go ahead and read that again since I messed up. How do stylistic devices reveal Billy Joe's changing perspective? So in this case, boys and girls, you might be thinking like, I didn't really understand that framing question, Miss Villarreal. Well, we need to examine what stylistic devices are in order to be able to answer that framing question. So that's exactly what we're going to do. As you can see here, we do have some words that we do need to write down in our vocabulary section of our notebook. So I'm going to go ahead and be explaining them. And while I'm explaining, you do need to make sure that you write this down, okay? All of it. Every single thing you see here, make sure you write it down because these are very important vocabulary words that I'm going to be discussing, and they are going to be a part of your exit ticket. So make sure that you write them down at this time. Okay, boys and girls, so first, vocabulary word, stylistic devices, literary techniques related to style. So in this case, we do have an example. Figurative language is a type of stylistic device. When we think of figurative language, we have to make sure that we put into perspective that there's different types of figurative language. Sometimes figurative language can be used within metaphors. It is a figure of speech trying to compare two things. A stylistic device can also be a simile when we are also comparing two things using like or as. Another stylistic device can be personification when we give human characteristics to non-human things. And then last but not least, we also have a symbolism, which we looked at last week, when there's a bigger picture or something in the book that symbolizes something that is happening within the story. So that is the first vocabulary word. You can go ahead and pause now to write that. Next word, point of view. The position or point from which one views a subject. Now, some of you may be thinking, Miss, do we have to write that whole thing? Well, yes, you do, and I would like if you took these notes, so please make sure that you do write them down because I promise it's going to help you for the exit ticket, and that is going to be one of your grades that you do receive this week, that exit ticket that you are going to complete after this video. So, in literature, it means the viewpoint from whom the story is told. Now, in point of view, we already know that we should know that we have a first-person point of view and a third-person point of view. Out of the Dust uses a first-person point of view, telling the story through Billy Joe, who speaks directly to the reader, versus using a third-person point of view that tells the story through a narrator who is not a character. So in this case, what would you think Bud Not Buddy and Out of the Dust were? Would you think they are first-person point of view or third-person point of view? This time I would tell you to put it in the chat box. So since we don't have a chat box, that's fine. Just, keep your answer to yourself. But I'm going to be looking forward to hearing those answers tomorrow. So yeah, think about it. Bud Not Buddy and Out of the Dust, right? Bud Not Buddy and Out of the Dust were both books in the viewpoints of who? So I really want you to think about that for tomorrow, and we will discuss it. Some examples of point of view can be a position or a stand. In this case, when we read books, it is the point of view of someone that is telling the story, or like the definition says, the viewpoint. So please make sure you pause now to write this word down completely. Number 3, perspective. Perspective is a little bit similar to point of view, but it is different. So make sure you really pay attention to this next part so you don't get confused in the exit ticket. Perspective is a person's point of view about a subject. Okay, about something. So in this case, when it comes to literature, it means a particular way. It can be negative, neutral, or positive, but this perspective is from a character's view of someone or something. Another way to look at this would be an angle or the outlook of someone. So when we think of perspective, I want you to think of how the person is feeling about a subject. How does Billy Joe feel towards the dust storms that are happening in the book? Does she feel negative about it? Does she feel neutral, which means she kind of, is in the middle? She doesn't really care about them, but she does care about them? Or does she feel positive about the dust storms? So I'm sure that's kind of an easy question to answer, because Billy Joe in the book kind of describes that these dust storms are inconvenient a lot of the times, especially during when she's in school or when she's at home. I also want you to look at perspective, the word perspective, and think about, but when the Amoses locked him in the shed by himself at night, what was his perspective about being locked in the shed? What was his perspective on the Amoses? Was he negative towards what happened, what they did to him? Was he neutral? Did he not really care, but he did care, kind of in the middle? Or was he, feeling really positive about being locked in the shed by the Amoses? Again, that's another really easy question to answer by using our background knowledge from the books that we've read so far, and of course using context clues from the books too. Getting that feel of what these characters are, going through, getting their perspective and putting ourselves in their shoes in order to kind of be able to view that subject in their eyes and how they feel about it. Moving on, we do have two more words that we're going to be looking at, the word sympathy and compassion. And then we're going to go ahead and kind of just talk about how, people were very sympathetic and very compassionate when it came to these teenage runaways that we looked at, or the article that we read last week that we learned about. So these are two words. I would like you to go ahead and pause this recording if you need to write them down, and then you can move on. And same thing, if you need to go back to look at the first 3 vocabulary words to write them down, you're more than welcome to rewind and go back. Okay, moving on. So sympathy. Sympathy, most of us have seen this word so far within this module, because there was a lot of people that felt sympathy towards these humans that were going through a lot of struggle during the Great Depression. In the article Hoovervilles, we had that one donor who donated so much money, right, to the Hoovervilles. So that was a person who was showing sympathy, showing compassion, showing pity on these people that were struggling. And then, of course, last week, we viewed the article, The Hoover's Prodigal Children. We saw that there were strangers that were helping out, these young teenagers that were runaways. We notice in Out of the Dust is another example that Ma, feeds this boy that comes around because he is asking for food. So there was a lot of people that were being sympathetic towards these people going through struggle. So the meaning of sympathy, the feeling and showing of concern and compassion for someone in physical or mental pain. Some synonyms or examples: compassion and pity. That brings us to our next vocabulary word. We have seen compassion in the past. Okay, you have written it down before, so it should be in your ELA notebook where your vocabulary words are, but I would like you to write it down once more, because this is a word I would love for you to include in your end of module essay that you're going to be writing for me. Compassion, what does it mean? Well, sharing the suffering of another that produces a desire to help. So one example we can think of is in one of the poems, Ma donates clothes, food to people who are also living in poverty. So as we know, Ma, Billy Joe, and Daddy, the small family is living in poverty, meaning they are extremely poor. They don't have much. But Ma still shows compassion by donating, the little that she can to help others. So synonyms and examples for the word compassion: heart, kindness, mercy, tenderness. And I would love so much for a lot of us to be, using these terms in our everyday life, showing compassion to other people, trying to help them out, especially during these tough times. A question that I have for us before we move on is, what was a result of people feeling sympathetic and compassionate for the runaway teen situation? So as we remember, we had a lot of, last week we read the article of a lot of kids and teens feeling a burden to their family, so they would run away and ride the rails. So what was the result of this? Think about it. You know, people did feel sympathetic and compassionate for these young children who would run away from home. A lot of them would help them by feeding them, giving them food, clothing them, sometimes even giving them work so that they could earn a little bit of money. So the result, you know, was sometimes really good, but then there was other times where people were rude, didn't want to help these runaway children, or they would, you know, run them off. In the article and in the book, we can see that a lot of people were sympathetic, and we see a lot of examples of when people are being compassionate by helping people who are in need. Next slide. We're going to go ahead and look at one more vocabulary word, which is going to be repetition. This is a word that is fairly easy to remember. It's something that is repeated. And we're going to be looking at that repetition in our sentences and in some of the excerpts that we're going to be examining today. An example of this is an echo, or when something is said more than one time. So at this time, I need you to go ahead and take out your handout 21B, varying sentences, right here. Take it out. It's in your Wit and Wisdom workbook. Look for the page that says 21B. Please don't send me a message saying, Miss, I couldn't find it. No. Take this time, pause the video, look for your Wit and Wisdom blue student workbook, the one that we always use. Turn to page 21B, varying sentences. It looks like this. It's titled like this in your book, so take some time to find that. If you don't have the Wit and Wisdom workbook, take out your notebook, sheet of paper, and make sure that you write neatly, because these notes are going to be shown to me tomorrow, and I need to make sure that you are practicing your handwriting and that you are writing neatly. So the directions. Read the following paragraph aloud, and then we're going to be answering the questions. Okay, so this is an excerpt, which is a small sample from the book. Obviously, we can see the citations. It's coming from page 59. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to pause the video now so you can read this to yourself, so you practice your fluency and your reading skills. And then I'm going to go ahead and read it for us out loud as well. So go ahead and pause the video now to read this to yourself. Ma constantly gives to such strangers and out of the dust. Ma donates both food and clothing for charitable causes. Ma does this though the family is poor. Ma sits him down and gives him biscuits and milk when a boy comes to the house. She knows that somewhere out there, his mother is worrying about him and wishing her boy would come home. Ma sees her own child in the wild boy of the road. She cannot turn him away. What did you notice about that sentence in the excerpt? Did you notice that Ma was mentioned multiple times at the beginning of the sentence? Ma, ma, ma in the third sentence, and ma in the fourth sentence. And then when we move on to the fifth sentence, we can see here that we're still talking about ma. And then in the fifth sentence, we see the word ma again. So did you notice that there's some repetition going on in this poem here, or in this excerpt? So we can see some examples here. Let me go ahead and make this a little better for you to see. So as we can see here, the sentences all have the same subject, which is ma, or ma is also referred to she in this example. We also notice that the sentences all begin with the subject, and they have very simple structure. Notice the sentences, boys and girls. They're very short. I want you to specifically look at this third sentence right here. Ma does this even though the family is poor. That is a very, very short sentence. We can also see that the sentences are also about the same length. They're not very long. So this is something that I would like for you to take into consideration because, while I was grading your assignments this weekend, I was noticing that some of my students are writing very, very short. And, I let you know in the feedback that I gave you in your graded assignments that you need to elaborate and add to your ideas. So make sure that when you are answering open-ended questions, that you try your very best to elaborate and make it longer. You don't want to write simple sentences that are very repetitive, like this example. Moving on. So now we're going to get down to business, boys and girls. So make sure you have your paper ready. Make sure you have a pencil. Please do not write in red pen. That is a huge no. Okay, and it's because usually teachers, I want you to get into the habit to write in a pencil, because I was noticing last week that a lot of my students are writing with a red pen or a black pen, and they're doing a lot of scratching out, scribbling. Please don't do that. We want to try and make sure that we turn in neat work, work with a pencil, so that if you make a mistake, you're able to erase it. Now, if for whatever reason you don't have pencils at home, don't worry. You don't have to go to the store to buy any. That's fine. You can write in a pen, but try your very best to not make any mistakes, okay? Because I want to see neat work. I don't want to see any sloppy work with a bunch of scribbles, like some of my students that turned in some sloppy work. But once again, make sure you have a pencil ready. So what we're going to be doing, I'm going to go ahead and be guiding you for the first 3 questions. And then on the back of the page for independent practice, you will complete those questions 4 and 5 on your own. Okay? So by tomorrow, this handout should be completely done. Once again, we are going to do questions 1, 2, and 3 together. And then for independent practice, you need to make sure that you work on questions 4 and 5 on your own. So let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and switch over. Okay, boys and girls, so I went ahead and I'm going to be going over the handout within the PowerPoint. So this is what you do need to write down as I review it. So make sure you pause at any time if you need to write, or you can go ahead and write as you listen. So question number 1, what do you notice about the lengths of the sentences? How does that impact your reading and understanding of the paragraph? You do not have to write exactly what I wrote. If you would like to write in your own sentence, you're more than welcome to do that. So some things that I notice about this excerpt right here is I notice that all of the sentences have the same subject, it's starting at the beginning of each sentence. So the subject meaning Ma, and we also have the word she that is used multiple times. These sentences are also very short and straight to the point. There is not much elaboration in here. How does this impact your reading and understanding of the paragraph? Well, to me, this impacts my reading because different sentence structures help keep readers more interested than sentences being repeated over and over. So that is something that I feel impacts my reading. You are more than welcome to write your own sentence if you would like. You also can pause this video to write down these notes for question number 1. Or you can continue to the next question, which is what I'm going to do at this time. Question number 2, what do you notice about the structure of the sentences? How does that impact your reading and understanding of the paragraph? So when we go and we look at the excerpt once more, which is on your handout, we will go ahead and notice that these sentences are very simple, short, and they mostly talk about one person. Few sentences include some textual evidence, as we can see here, which is great, but we don't see much of the elaboration process in here. So what I went ahead and wrote is that the structure of the sentences are very short and simple. They talk mostly about one person and only few sentences include textual evidence and do not elaborate or explain the ideas. One short sentence among larger sentences draws attention to the sentence and it gives it greater impact. So as we can see here, we must notice that there is textual evidence, but notice how the elaboration is so short. It needs to be longer and it needs to include more specific details explaining why the evidence is important. Moving on to question number 3. What do you notice about the subjects of the sentence? How does that impact your reading and understanding of the paragraph? So when we go back and look at the excerpt once more, we will go ahead and notice that the subject is obviously Ma and what Ma does to help others. But when we see this, we kind of are able to see that the subject, and I did make a little mistake here. I put an X instead of a C. Sorry about that. We do notice that the subject is Ma. And the writing sounds kind of choppy. So these sentences don't really have good flow because all of the sentences have similar patterns, meaning that they are a subject-predicate sentence. So when we go back, we notice in the example that it consistently talks just about Ma, and it starts off the sentence the same every single time. It's very repetitive. We need to have some variation in there where we change it up a bit. Now in the very last portion, which is going to be the back of Handout 21B, varying sentences, you're going to notice 2 more questions. These are the questions that I would like you to go ahead and practice on your own. Make sure that you write in complete sentences and end, of course, with punctuation. So notice how I started my sentence with a capital and I did include specific writings. Make sure you also add that punctuation, and if you're going to have another sentence, you obviously want to start with a capitalization and end with a punctuation. Now, the expectation is that you do write at least 2 sentences. Don't give me those short and simple sentences. I want you to explain and elaborate in your writing. Okay, number 5, how would you revise this paragraph to improve the sentence variety and make it more effective and better, a better way to convey meaning? So please make sure you do use the example here. And try and rewrite this sentence exactly the way it is, but obviously having a variety of starts, a variety of finishes. You can maybe even write something that says, in Out of the Dust, Ma is a character that shows generosity to strangers by donating both food and clothing for charitable causes, even though her family is also poor. You can continue on number 4. Once again, you're revising this paragraph. So you can also even say something like, in the poem, Wild Boy on the Road, Ma sits him down and gives him biscuits and milk. She knows that somewhere out there his mother is worrying about him. You can say something like, this shows Ma's compassion for others even though times are tough. So you do need to make sure in question number 5 that you do try your very, very best to revise this paragraph. Try and keep the same textual evidence, but I want you to kind of try and change up the sentences a bit, and I'm really excited to be able to share what we write in tomorrow's live session. So once again, boys and girls, your independent practice at this time is going to be to work on questions 4 and 5. Please go ahead and do that now. So you should have already finished Handout 21B, varying sentences. You should have already went ahead and read Out of the Dust pages 73 to 84. You do need to make sure that you're on page 84 by tomorrow. And then of course you're going to be having an exit ticket. So let me go ahead and show you where that's at and what that looks like at this time. Okie dokie, so this is what the exit ticket looks like. It's going to be called Monday October 19th, vocabulary ET. Please make sure you only complete this once you're completely done writing all of the notes, once you're completely done watching this video. So the first questions are going to be to, of course, match the definition to its word, to its vocabulary word. So you must have written the definitions. Please make sure you write them, because it's very easy to tell students who didn't write them. If you fail this very easy exit ticket, that's going to tell me you did not write down the vocabulary word. So please just write them down so that you can get the 100. I'm also going to have here what handout is due tomorrow. You do write in whatever handout is due tomorrow. And then, of course, true or false, very simple question. This past week, I had a lot of students completing or turning in incomplete work, and I'm not going to accept that. You need to make sure that you're completing all of your work. We do this in class together, so make sure it's completed, boys and girls, if you want to get that full credit, okay? Other than that, I hope you have a wonderful Monday. I'm sorry that I am unavailable today. I am having some family concerns that I do need to take care of, so I'm sorry that I'm not able to go live, but I promise I'll be back hopefully tomorrow, going live for my students. Okay, make sure you get your work done. Have a wonderful Monday, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.